Welcome to Foundation and Podcast, the officially unofficial podcast for Foundation on Apple TV Plus. I'm Jim.
I'm A.Ron.
And today we're talking Season 2, Episode 9, Long Ago, Not Far Away. A.Ron, what'd you think of the penultimate episode of the season?
Is that a nod to Star Wars?
I think so. It's gotta be.
I felt like this is an episode that's kind of loaded to the brim with old sci-fi references, which I'll point at as we go. I love this episode. I thought this episode was cool. I thought this episode is great. I have one lingering question that I amassed on subsequent. I think I've watched this 4 times because I did another thing where I watched this episode, the second recorded last one, and I had a almost 2-week wait. Which will be the last time this happens to me because tonight I'm going to watch the finale and then I'll have the same God knows how long wait till the next one with everybody else. But I said as soon as I watched this, like, this is a hell of an episode of Foundation, and it's audacious and it's cool and it's got a lot of big ideas. The only thing I acquired is like a little question on subsequent watches is, so how the hell is corporeal Hari alive still?
Good question.
I thought that Gail said she felt him die, felt him drown. So I have a big a question about that. But I think the more I've thought about it, I think the answer might lie in this episode. I mean, we got tons of Demerzel stuff, got tons of Cleonic Dynasty stuff, a space battle that was fucking cool. What more can I ask for? How about you, Jim?
Yeah. Sometimes shows aim to subvert your expectations and they fall on their face because they subvert them too hard or they're just trying too hard. And this is not one of those shows. This episode of Foundation absolutely subverted every expectation I had. But both, as somebody who has read that first book, I think there's a lot of deviations. As I recall, it's been a while, but as I recall, a lot of deviations, but they all felt like they were right for this show. I'm not one of those like adaptation purists who needs to have everything kind of line up with the source material. I appreciated when The Expanse went off the rails of the books quite a bit. I think it improved a lot of things. I think here, everything they're doing that is not, 100% canon as far as the books go is really impressing me. If they were doing it poorly, I'd have some choice words to say, but they're not. They're kind of nailing it. This episode sort of blew me away with how hard it subverted everything I thought I wanted.
And not just subverted, like, I was convinced down till the shockwave hit Polly that Hari was going to pull out some kind of planetary defense aura, and it was all going to, like, the Empire was going to be impotent. Like, there was, like, so many things, like, oh, this is going to be the thing that saves them. You're going to walk into the null field, it's going to be your ass, Empire. Hari's showing up as a hologram. You're going inside the vault. He's going to pull you apart atom by atom, son. Like, what? I was
and
like,
then the planet shatters, and it's definitive, right? There's no chance that anybody has survived this.
I mean, look, you can do anything as long as you do it well. So, like, there's a part of me that says a lot of the Foundation does things with smoke and mirrors and illusion on a grand scale. Is it possible that they have moved their entire planet and there's a hollow planet or a recreate? I mean, again, I'm not saying that yes, it should be definitive, but the technology involved. I'm just saying that, like, I can't believe how just my jaw was dropped at the apparent destruction of everything that we had worked up to this point. Like, there ain't going to be a first Foundation. That's audacious.
Which, yeah, I mean, that's where I get to the point of, like, how hard are they subverting expectations from the books? And that feels like a pretty strong deviation.
But they've also, like, they had this thing where, like, the first Foundation knows about the second. So are they going to do a thing like, well, the second Foundation is actually the first Foundation, and there's a super secret third Foundation led up by the fucking ghost of Hari's son, or the ghost that was orbiting Halcyon or whatever, like... that's the thing. It's like and then you're talking about like what I would consider minor deviations. For the first time, I started looking at this episode and wondering if like they might swerve on some of the big like mass humanity versus individual action questions,
thematic stuff.
Yeah, and like I don't think that's invalid. Like we have Foundation, the book series. If Goyer wants to do something a little bit more individualist and a little bit less deterministic, like I think that's a fine interpretation. But I'm just saying, like it might, like I like even things that I would think I would take for granted, like the psychohistory is 100% correct. It has to be right. Like I don't even know if that's necessarily on the table.
Yeah, and I don't know that one issue needs to be like the master thesis of this whole show, right? It can deal with multiple ideas. It's hopefully going to have a long run. So
I do too.
If we spend 5 seasons with determinism versus individual will and mass action kind of stuff, does that get boring somewhere along the way? Maybe we can deal with other themes as well.
Like the closest show I can think of to like delving into those issues, I can think of like Devs. That didn't get old for 8 episodes. Westworld, but I don't think the things that got old on Westworld were its existential, philosophical, deterministic, free will, consciousness. That shit never got boring. It's just like all the other cruft that was added onto the story. So it's like I don't know. I love philosophical navel gazing like that. This, I've said it's like one of the reasons that like I kind of I'm nervous for this show in a way that I'm not usually on a lot of shows, because other shows, okay, if it fails, oh well, that'll be fun to cover. If it succeeds, obviously that's good too. I want this show to work because I love science fiction, and we are on like a real renaissance of science fiction right now. We're coming on like I can't think of a decade like we've had.
Well, it feels like there's high stakes for this, and I don't want to put too much pressure on the people making it, but in my mind, like this is a test of very high budget sci-fi in the modern fandom environment, and we did that test with like fantasy stuff. With kind of started with Lord of the Rings, but we really got to it with Game of Thrones, and I feel like that kind of killed a lot of the excitement in the genre when Game of Thrones ended, and it was just this big kind of wet blanket over everything.
You don't want the sci-fi
they're not still
equivalent.
Making fantasy, and then you look at what happened with the latest Lord of the Rings show, and it's like, man, I don't want sci-fi to go down that route, because sci-fi hasn't had the big boost that fantasy had 20 years ago. Going through it right now still. I want
Somehow
sci-fi to get there, so I don't want this to like fall on its face and Apple be like, we're pulling the plug on all our sci-fi stuff.
It's wild because people would be like, well, there's Star Trek and there's Star Wars and Marvel, arguably all that science fiction too. And it's true, but that for some reasons it's its own thing. Like Marvel and Star Wars and Star Trek being popular and important have had nothing to do with the rest of science fiction in my entire life.
50 years now, right?
And then like if Goyer's to be believed, they're still giving a fraction of the budget to Foundation that House of the Dragon gets, that the Lord of the Rings, fucking Rings of Power gets, all those kind of things do. And like, I would love a big beefy hit. Like I loved Expanse, but it was not a big beefy hit. I would love a big beefy hit that like Hollywood sits up and take notes. Like, holy shit, we can throw $300 million at one of these, but we can and see what we can really come up with. So I think I was thinking like I don't like last season I was really on pins and needles because there's some things about the show I didn't think were working as well as others, and I was just like, oh god, I hope they stick the landing. And I thought they did. This season, 9 episodes in with 1 to go, feels like such a confident step forward in everything I'm like, gee whiz, I wish the show would improve on. They have. All the things I'm like, this show is a strength. I hope they continue to play into it. They have. I'm just incredibly pleased, and I'm trying to think of like how could they fuck up the finale.
Sure.
Because all I want to do is watch it and see. But like I think we're gonna come away with a pretty satisfying season here, Jim.
Yeah. No, this is the epic scale kind of operatic Shakespearean type of thing that I think sci-fi has been searching for a while. I remember like watching, what was that Ridley Scott show? Raised by Wolves. And thinking, oh, this could be it, right? This could be the sci-fi TV show that really makes a mark. That thing petered out almost immediately for me. I tried to watch it twice, got 3 episodes in, and shut it off.
I know. I was gonna say you think that after the first episode, by third episode, it's like honk shoe. But and I know the show has its fans. I don't want to talk shit about it, but
for sure. But getting 20 episodes into this show now, almost next week, and seeing it continue to get better is really kind of energizing me as a sci-fi fan.
And it's just really also, like, I think it fits in so well to Apple TV Plus's other portfolio. Like, they are, like, to me, coming up with the reputation for this is where smart television goes to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, other channels are where it goes maybe to die. But, you know, they're making... And it's like, I don't like everything they're doing, like the Invasion show. Not super huge fan of that. But they're doing enough, like, really smart, really creative adult work. And ever since the word that I dig it. And, you know, we haven't even got to the performances yet.
Yeah.
That scene with Bell and Glaywin succeeds pretty much on the back of their performances and the relationship that they've built in just a scant few minutes of screen time. Yeah, I just, man, and then you're like, then you got the usual suspects where you got Jared Harris and Lee Pace and Laura Bryn. All of them are just absolutely incredible, top tier talent at the height of their game. Excellent script, stakes that I was like on pins and needles about. It's a great penultimate episode.
Yeah,
I can't wait to see, because like it's just such a table flip too.
Right. That's what I mean, man. Expectations. I had them, and they got blown away. All right, let's get into the recap, yeah?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we start off on Trantor. A mere 610 years ago. You know, that's another way I was subverted here. I thought we'd be going farther back. But 610 years ago...
I'm modest.
Yeah, we get the story of a young prince... and somehow they're going to be familiar characters 610 years ago. He finds the passage in the mural, which leads to the prison where he finds a segmented Demerzel. She's being held in, like, you know those books where they have transparencies inside and they show, like, the cardiovascular system and the musculature of humans, and they're all laid over each other. You can flip the page to see each one. That's what this is. He keeps it secret through the years as he listens to her stories of Earth and robot wars, but she wants to be freed, and I think he knows this. And he's in crisis because he's about to become emperor after his mother's death as a young man we would recognize as Dawn. And Demerzel tries to use his sort of distraught state as a means of escape, but doesn't quite work then. Many years later, however, when he is the Lee Pace version, the Day version of himself, he comes back to reintegrate her and get another story, and she begins seducing him sexually. And many years later, he comes back as Dusk to say he's called off his marriage because his fiancée wasn't her. And then he implants this chip in her that gives her the freedom to harm all humans except for him, and restricts her from leaving her body. And then he clues her in on his clone plan and asks her to love him, and she agrees. That's 16 minutes of the episode. I know, man.
I thought you were going to recap the whole fucking thing. Oh my god.
I was uncut, man. What do I do?
I'm trying to hold on to this chicken joke I want to make, and you're just going on and on.
Hey, don't blame me. Blame the first 16 minutes of this episode.
When I found that the Cleon's name means famous, I immediately thought of like Terrence Mann dressed up as the Colonel and like famous Cleon's chicken. Okay. I need there to be in the Galactic Empire famous Cleon's chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone wants to do some fan art of Terrence Mann in a white version of his dusk attire, that's what he comes in with the Demerzel. He's spent his whole life. Demerzel, I figured it out. There's 11 secret herbs and spices that I've managed to combine. All right.
Yeah, send me a 12 piece.
One of the other science fiction shout-outs I thought was like when they called her the segmented woman, I had to think of The Illustrated Man, the Ray Bradbury classic short story collection, the framing device of which is a freak show worker whose body is covered in animated tattoos that he claims were put on him by a witch that could foretell the future. And I thought it's kind of like just a nod. But it was like a cool detail, like that she's been pinned up like an anatomy doll, or like you said the like these cell shaded, the things they have in anatomy books. I thought of like those bodies exhibits, where they plastined people and sliced them up and you can see through. And I thought because
it's kind of horrifying and also an interesting way to imprison a being that has a distributed consciousness.
Yeah, which they gave us a couple more hints about that in this episode. But I thought because I talked last episode about how this could be very Scooby-Doo. You got an emperor just accidentally finds this chamber. I actually was charmed by the fact that the young Cleon, it was a complete accident. Like he wasn't destined for greatness. He was just a boy counting the number of faces that were worked into the carvings and stuff, and he's touching each one as he goes, and that eventually led him to the mural that led him down to this robot dungeon. And it's such a mythical story, like finding a genie and a prison genie that has all this immense power, but it's also got all this immense danger, and it felt very like a fable, self-contained within this larger universe. Is it strictly speaking true? I'll ask you this: do you have any reason to doubt the veracity of anything that Cleon I is saying here?
No.
I felt
because
honest
we see
to me.
Yeah,
and it's not flattering, right? Like I think if a flattering portrayal would have him give her the choice before he put it in the chip, but like this feels like an honest recounting, warts and all. The fact that did Demerzel really love him, or did she just try to manipulate a kid to let her out? Is she? She's a leader of a robot faction that was very powerful, one of the last ones that hold out. So she has it in her nature to wage effective war against humankind. Everything I found out about Demerzel just made her so much more fascinating.
Yeah, we find out some information about her identities that she's had over the years. She for sure has had other names that she's gone by, perhaps even other appearances. It's not certain, but it's kind of implied when he says that, I'm restricting you from leaving this body.
I think she said something else too about she's had different forms in a previous scene. So like, yeah, I'm guessing that she has had, just tons of different physical forms. And it's interesting when she was telling some of the fables, she's talking about when the robots had to go into hiding, and she said the big ones hid in big places, and the little ones hid in little places where they folded up their knees by their ears. And I was thinking of like, like how big was the biggest artificial robot? Are they as big as like those mining, the lithium mining equipment on that one planet? Did they have like, if you look at what the Foundation is doing with human brain hybrid starships, like did it start that way and they're bootstrapping it back? I thought that stuff was really cool. 18,000 years old, she's been in constant operation. Yeah.
And that was 610 years ago. So she's closer to 19 now.
True. Who's counting?
They explicitly mention Earth in this episode. So we know that we are, in fact, in the same universe.
This is the Milky Way, yeah.
And maybe in the same galaxy.
You haven't read any of the books, so you're good. Well, you have read the first book. So you're a good litmus test to talk about this stuff with. What is the significance of Earth in the story, if any? Like, why is it important to establish that this is Earth? Why is there any? Is it just flavor, background flavor? Do you think there's a plot point?
That's what it feels like to me so far. They may introduce some import to it later, but yeah, I'm not picking up anything that it really matters. This could be Earth, or this could be SETI Alpha 5 for all I care, right?
Could be another sly Star Wars inversion where, you know, like it's that whole thing is galaxy far, far away, but this is, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very close to home.
It's the other famous galactic empire, and they're trying to differentiate themselves.
She said she's been in this chamber for 5,000 years, which I was sitting there trying to imagine the feeling, but it's not on human timescale, so I really can't.
And it's also, she doesn't have, strictly speaking, human feelings. Like, one of the things we learned is when this, they name-checked this emperor, Aberanus, who is a canonical foundation, or Galactic Empire emperor. I don't know where these are all compiled, or, like, you know, there's a mention at various points in the series, but this is one of the early ones. The only thing that the Foundation wiki had on him is that he was responsible for enacting the law codes of Aberanus, which includes the forbidding of the denigration of public officers of the Empire. So he's the first guy who made it illegal to insult an Imperial official. I don't know if there's anything that ties in with that, but the fact that this guy was exceptionally cruel, and he was torturing her, but the way she didn't say I felt pain, she said he liked to imagine that I felt pain, and so I produced tears, you know, to try to like curry favor with him. I'm not saying that Demerzel can't feel pain, but I don't think that she can feel physical pain.
She definitely feels emotional distress. You can see it. You understand
she shed a
it
tear
from this
when she
performance.
realized what she lost in this episode.
Which, is that fake in the context of this? Is that just a consequence of what she thinks Cleon wants her to feel in that moment?
Right. Because is she still, like, that's the question we ask is, you know, is 600 years later, is she still playing the game? And I would say, of course. Because what's 600 years, you know, what's 60 years in against 6,000? What's 600 years versus... And the other thing is, like, we're talking about her, what she feels. Is like, I don't think that she, strictly speaking, feels the way humans do. She feels things, but, like, boredom and the passage of time and all, like, I don't know what it's like to experience a robot for 5,000 years. Can they just kind of, like, go into a low power state and, like, those things, like, fly by like a night of sleep to us? Are they consciously aware and going insane, like Hari talks about, being stuck in the Prime Radiant?
Doesn't seem like it if she's been in there imprisoned for 5,000 years.
But what does a sane robot look like? It doesn't look like this one.
I mean, maybe it does. I don't know. I don't have any context for sane or insane robots.
There was a span of 5 seconds where Demerzel had freedom, true freedom. Like the narrator said, she could have strode forth out there, broken Cleon's neck, and then probably with her skills and abilities, probably could have been off the world and done whatever she wanted. Restart the robot wars, whatever. Which was a fear of the other emperor. Why didn't she? Why did she hesitate and let Cleon open her neck up and install a new chip? Was there some love there?
Is she still bound in that moment by the 3 laws? Certainly not.
I can't imagine a robot war criminal would still have,
So, I don't know. I mean, there could be genuine feeling here. I wouldn't rule that out. It's
or just like some
though,
kind of gratitude. Like, was this some kind of like mistaken, you know, like, well, I'll hear his proposal out, and not thinking that, because it seemed to me that she didn't think he was capable of this.
Yeah.
She said, "This is cruel. This is beneath you. This isn't who you are."
Yeah. And I think over to what she tells Day later in this episode, Cleon the 17th or whichever he is, about having failed in her mission to raise him into the kind of leader he needed to be. I wonder if she thought she had succeeded with this Cleon the First in kind of grooming him. And
that's what I was getting to.
So she trusted him because she trusts her own ability to groom him, and then turns out she couldn't.
And I wonder if, like, every Cleon, when she shoves him into the disintegrator field, there's a little bit of, like, I fucked up with this one too, but maybe next time I'll do better. Like, she's trying to get to, like, a Cleon that won't disappoint her, because every single one, it must be like, I mean, if you were a mortal, you'd say it's infuriating and exhausting that, like, you start off this innocent boy, that you admired, had some kind of affection for, like going back hundreds of years, and he always turns into some power-hungry narcissist no matter what you do, because it's the same man you're raising again and again and again.
Which, can I just throw this out there? Is there a case for Demerzel having tainted the line of Cleon I in order to try and deviate from that man who she cannot
There's a lot of interesting things to point
break
out.
free
So
from?
the next time we see Cleon I and Demerzel will be in the first season, when he's realizing he's not going to live long enough to see the culminations of his plans, but they've got the first clone ready to go, and the programming
Space
is being
elevator.
completed. This is a Brother Dusk version. We have a kind of a young looking, I guess, Brother Dusk configuration Cleon I. So there's like I don't know, 20, 30 years in between these next two scenes. We debated about when they talked about the programmers finishing their work. I'm not so sure Cleon is done with the one chip. He might there might be all kinds of moves and counter moves from like what Demerzel tries to do and what she's able to do, because she has a large amount of latitude, because she engages in negotiations and missions on behalf of the Empire that day, dusk, dawn have no idea. Like she does at the end of this episode and says, hey, that's one of the reasons you're so fucked up. I was so busy trying to unfuck the Empire when you were growing up that you kind of came, just try again next generation, kid. I guess does all that track?
I could definitely see programming being updated on that chip, and her being given freedoms or more restrictions depending on the scenario.
I would think more restrictions. Like, you're personally loyal to me, but is there some way that you found out a way to not? To your point though, her perverting the genetic dynasty would be her first play to get freedom.
Right. If she continues, her subservience under this same man forever, it's going to result in the same problem, right? She won't ever be able to raise that kid into the man that's going to free her. But if she can change the man himself at the genetic level, maybe.
It's pretty clear that he says they'll have my code, and so you'll be loyal to them. That it is tied up that like she is loyal to this genetic individual.
Seems so, yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder, because the thing is, like, okay, so her evil robot plan is, well, I'm going to pollute his gene pool so he's no longer the same person and I can rebel. But that itself is a rebellion. So I wonder if they're exploring some kind of, like, Cleon forgot to include the or by omission of action. And she saw a threat and a plan that she just decided not to Demerzel.
Could be.
But it also could be the story of her trying her damnedest best to keep the galaxy stitched together. Because she said what I thought it was spooky what she said. She goes, I spent your formative years trying to stitch together the tattered remains of the Empire, implying that she's realized she's completely failed. So what does Demerzel do now? If is she free now? That she, like, is she calling it like, okay, well this Empire's dead. I'm no longer bound to be loyal to it.
Does she have the authority to do that in her own mind?
If Cleon forbid her from leaving right now, would he? And can he?
Sure. All interesting
questions. Are there
questions.
orders that he could give to Demerzel that she could just ignore?
Yeah. Direct orders? I'm not sure. Because we've seen Day disagree, right? Like, I go back to the snapping of Dawn's neck in season 1. Day vehemently disagreed with that. Dusk was the one pushing that.
Sure.
And she technically there disobeyed him, though he didn't give a direct order not to kill Dawn. So I don't know.
And could she... Okay, let me ask you this. So it's funny because Goyer said that it's his personal headcanon. He's careful not... I don't think he's saying that it's canon. But he said, in my mind, once Cleon smashed up the Emperor, that she killed him. How can Demerzel kill any Cleon? Like, is it only is this something she can only do when they have corrupted genetic code?
That's what made me wonder. Like, did she corrupt the genetic code? Because I would think like. What can it key on, right? What can this device key on to keep her from harming an individual. It has to be some kind of genetic code. And if that drifts far enough away, that, that might not be a criteria anymore, or that criteria could be invalid.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe this is a plan. Maybe she has not been under their actual control for a very long time. She's simply been using them as a means to an end to rule the empire. A mouthpiece.
That's what it seems like. Because, like, it's also telling what the older Cleon, when he finds out about this, it's not like, oh, okay, well, this is cool now. He's angered and incensed. Boy, that's a cool scene, too. But,
yeah, there's so much in this episode.
I was going to say, have we covered everything here?
Well, let's go back to that for a second, because at the end of this scene is really poignant and interesting, right? Because, like, Cleon here is viewing this as an act of love and requesting her love in return, and she grants it. But come on, why is she granting it? I mean, he then says, like, how I wish I had asked before I had made it compulsory.
Right. So, like,
she's talking about how this is not freedom. You are not giving me freedom here. That is not love either. And I don't know that Cleon is registering that in the moment, that she has not gained freedom and he has not gained love.
I think, yes, but Cleon sees it as a good bargain because from his position, he doesn't have freedom or love either.
Oh, yeah.
He has obligations and destiny and duty and chains and restrictions. And, he's like giving her... I know it's an interesting bargain. It's like he didn't ask to be plucked out of unconsciousness and thrown into a body, and made this, and she didn't ask for. But like he's kind of like tough titties. But now we're in this together. You want your freedom, I want my freedom. Neither one of us can have it.
Yeah. And
I'll be loyal to you, and you'll be loyal to me. And but I mean, obviously, yeah, this is like it's some twisted shit. And it makes you wonder, like, what kind of agency does Demerzel have? Like, she has some. Like, she can choose to start intimacy with the children or not. That's what I would call wide fucking latitude. So how does she make decisions of state that the other exponents are not of? I don't know. Like, it's super fascinating. And you're, like you said, up to like 160 years ago, maybe she just gave up, and they're Dust said, our royal asses are just keeping the throne warm for her.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
It feels like, yeah. In fact, I think that's just the story they're telling. And it's also I thought it's interesting how he referred to these children. He doesn't call them. Calls them our children once when he's trying to appeal to him, but then he's like, these half men, he calls them. Like, he does not have any. He likes to refer to them as brothers when it's convenient, but that's not how Cleon saw this. Cleon saw this as a way, I don't know, to make it up for Demerzel, because he also said, like, the three of us triple her love, and that'll be enough for anyone. Like, I don't know. He's got this weirdly weird conception of what it is to be free and to be loved, and if he can't have it, no one can.
Yeah, I really like the voice they're writing this from, too. It's very much that ruler's plight kind of voice, right? I mean, the way he's talking about ruling as a prison and how he doesn't actually have freedom. Any common person would look at the ruler of a nation and say, well, they have the ultimate freedom, right? They're free to break the laws. They're free to make the laws, do anything they want. And yet the people inside that system would very much look at it as shackles of a sort. And I think they do a really good job, like, staying in that voice with all these characters.
And the fact that he doesn't consider what this scene really reminded me of is, remember that in Mad Men where Don Draper had like this housewife that he was busy at a conference, but he wanted her at the hotel, and he's like, oh, just wear this lingerie and read this erotic novel and just want me and I'll be back. And she like takes off and leaves, and he's like, what happened? She's like, what am I supposed to sit there and be in a sexual froth for like 12 hours or whatever? I mean, that's probably hot for you as you're, in between meetings, like, oh my God, his woman's waiting for me. And then you can go back. But like for me, like what the fuck is this for me? And it's like the revelation is like, oh shit, like my fantasy, I got big Don Draper energy from like Dusk rolling in there. I'm gonna call him Dusk. Cleon, old Cleon one. Like, I've figured it all out, Demerzel. This is how we can all get what we want. But it's just I, me, and not really thinking about what she valued. And I also thought it was really something interesting about when he asked her, do you love me? And she answers, she goes to do that characteristic position where she puts her hands over her navel. I thought that was interesting too. Because, like, if you look into New Agey kind of things on Eastern philosophies, like the navel is like a spiritual center of a person's being. It's like where some of our energies are generated from. It represents our first connection to a human being, the umbilical cord to our mother, the scar that's remained when that connection is severed. It represents our connection to humanity. It's super interesting that Demerzel closes that off when she assumes this role, and that none of the Cleon exponents even have navels.
Yeah.
I sound belly button obsessed, but I swear to God, this makes sense in my head. Like that there's something like that they are incapable of forming connection because that part of them spiritually is just gone. It doesn't exist. It was taken from them by this father, brother, bastard that they have.
Mm-hmm. No, I like it. It's a hell of a first scene as just a warm-up for the rest of the episode, which is maybe even better. Let's go back to present day. I feel much more comfortable there. Dusk is upset that Demerzel is the real Empire. That he's talking still to Cleon I.
Oh, wait a second. We didn't discuss this. What did you make of the Cleon the 17th or 16th, I think? What'd you make of him being in prison? Like, are we ever going to see him again? Or is he his cask of Amontillado
That's where I was getting
forever?
To right now.
I thought
he says it's all going to be undone by Day and Sarah's marriage, but Cleon I seems to have other ideas. He's unbothered by this marriage entirely, and he imprisons Dusk and Rue inside the laser cell. This is crazy, right? Because it's not just Dusk who's in there; it's Rue as well. So Sarah's going to be like, "What the hell?" Day is going to be like, "What the hell?" And nobody's going to be able to find them.
Is this Cleon the First that they're talking to? Is this actually like a Hari Seldon consciousness transfer that Demerzel communes with from time to time?
It's possible. I mean, it doesn't need to be, I guess. Or can it be the canned responses that Goyer
But it seems like he knows about the wedding and he's not worried about it, and that he takes action to imprison himself.
Mm-hmm.
So I forget. Did you answer my question of like, do you think we'll see the Rue and this Cleon again, or are they done?
It feels like they're done.
Save them.
That's the thing. I don't know that anybody is going to be able to find them. So I think
Demerzel?
They're probably done.
Demerzel could save them if she wanted to, and she might, because she's not happy with the state of the Empire and the way she says she has. And maybe this episode is giving us clue about what she means when she says Empire. The Empire is the state institution, not the man. Because when she talks about the fraying ends of Empire, is she talking about like Brother Dusk and Brother Day? And like, I ignored you, Brother Dawn, because these guys were such messes. Or is she referring... I think she's referring to the Empire as a physical entity.
Yeah, I think it's pretty evident now that it's referring to her rule. She has been de facto ruler, at least in Cleon I's mind, since the beginning of this clone dynasty. So I think she's referring to her own empire.
Well, the other thing is, like, I don't think... Was Cleon's father the actual ruler? Because I got the idea that his mother was the one that was the head of state.
She was, yeah. Because when she dies, so like, Dawn says, or young Cleon I says, "I'm going to become
emperor."
Emperor.
So he was like the emperor consort. I think that's really interesting that there's this precedent in his mind for a woman ruling, an eternal mommy.
And this is the person that Day put up the statue for, right?
Yes.
The massive statue in that stadium.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely something there that they're doing. I haven't quite sussed it out. But I don't know. We'll find out if we see them again. But in the meantime, let's go over to Ignis. We're in the middle of that ritual that Telum was using to steal Gale's body. Salvor fights her way to the chamber to stop it. She uses the mind blockers to paralyze the metallics, remove Gale from the chamber, and they run away as they're being shot at.
It's pretty fucked. So, like, this whole ritual is like...
Oh, yeah.
She's
dismantling her piece by piece. It's... Ugh.
Well, she's compelling her to say these things, like, but everyone, the whole congregation seems like, oh, this is happening of her own free will, and like this has happened every single time. It's just chilling that she's just like taking her over, but I don't know, not giving her even any dignity in like the struggle at the end. I thought it was particularly enraging to watch happen.
Yeah, and I wonder how effective it was. Is there going to be some remnant, because Telum dies in this episode? Will there be some remnant of Telum within Gale? Because there's a definite moment of possession, or I just noted that Salvor was a little bit too late. By the tiniest of margins. And then you look at the way the Gale is acting as soon as she pulls her out of there, and she's got this white glazed over eyes. She's in a trance. She's still stuck in it, right?
Yeah, so like what, yeah, and if that sonic beam or whatever disrupted the psychic shenanigans going on, like why didn't the white eye stuff started? Like was her brain already started to be blue screen or forever? I don't know. Man, I guess that would be a valid, but it's another one that's like, man, it's another avenue that can go down to like...
Sure, yeah.
Some people need to die and stay dead, I would say, in this show eventually.
Yeah, no, I'm
they
with
need
you.
to figure out. But yeah, that could be. I hope not, but that could be.
We'll see. Let's go over to Terminus now. The enclosure begins closing in. It begins in closing. Bel Rios meets with Constant and Hober. He asks a lot of questions, trying to figure out why he feels like he's being lured in. Constant says, well, maybe it's so you can catch the faith bug a little bit. And Bel gets word the Empire is boarded and leaves. I'm really pleased to see how this whole thing played out. Bel seems like a reasonable person and a smart person. You know, he feels like he's being baited here. Although, by the end of the episode... if it was a trap, the trap was not very effectively sprung in my mind.
Well, depends on how big the trap is and what
Sure.
scale and duration, like, Harry says.
Along enough time scales, everything's a trap.
That wrist implant is just where they put the sleep drug in, right? That's how that interface with the ship.
I assume so. I
thought the coloring was different, and maybe that the spacers had done something to track him, but I thought he was just trying to make an excuse for... just it sounded like he was just trying to, make sure that he could get out of here if he needed to. But
I see this going a lot worse with somebody else, kind of at the helm of this interrogation. I was relieved to see that Bel was not going to use their feelings for each other against them. That would feel sort of like a betrayal of his character, I think.
Right.
Or, a turn for his character at the very least. And by the end of it, we see how strong that respect for love is, right?
Yeah,
we see its limits. We see all of it.
His character's got to turn now, though. Like Empire is a son of a bitch.
If Glaywin had died screaming, "Beam me up, Scotty," maybe, but I don't know, man. He got the nod. He got the go ahead from Glaywin. And I know
it's easier because, like, at the end of the day, it would have been what, a delay of 30 minutes to go and grab Glaywin off the planet.
Yep, send a drop pod down, find the case and jump back up. Yeah,
get him back in there. I just forgot you just drop a case and let them jump into orbit. And it's just like it's a special pettiness of the Emperor that it had to happen. Meow,
Totally.
I don't see how you can walk back from that. I don't see how a man like Bel is going to go forward and continue to serve, especially when he sees that like Demerzel's not in on this. That I just think that it like Empire just really showed his ass this episode, his immaturity, like that final shot of him just bathing in idiot delight at the destruction and the pain that he's caused is just. You know, it's every, you know, inbred king we've ever, you know, the ruler we've ever seen depicted in fiction. It's every cruel tyrant.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the ultimate test of his loyalty to Empire and his oath specifically versus his affection for Glaewyn. And yeah, I feel like there's still very much an opportunity with Hober in the mix and Constant in the mix, their feelings for each other, for him to be sort of worn down from the conviction of his oath, or see the error in it, I guess. But boy, that stuff from Glaewyn this episode is
especially
is
it
kind
tests
of reinforcing it. You know, he's saying you need to stay where you are because you're the only thing keeping trillions of other people from suffering even more pain.
Well, that's right. He converted, like, there was a infection of faith, and it's Glaewyn and Bel's unshakable faith that the Empire is the only thing that keeps civilization going. And it's a little wild that they come out here and met the Foundation and still, but like, I mean, like I think Bell says, like, our dead man's hands on our switches are still way bigger and more powerful than yours at this time. And I guess that felt true. I didn't think it was, but I guess it is true.
Yeah, Hari was talking a very big game last episode, and seemingly he could not back it up. And I'd say seemingly because we have one more episode in this season to go.
And there's some hints. There's some hints in this episode that like either this was planned, or that there's more to it than it seems. We'll see.
That's always my initial thought, is there's more to this than it seems. But
you know,
sometimes
the writers could be tearing their hair out because, like, we dropped a black hole in a planet. How much more can we tell you that this planet's over, guys? Like,
yeah, sometimes, you know, a planet destruction is just a planet destruction.
Sometimes it is, Freud, but
sometimes a win is just a win.
Other times your consciousness is distributed. So what does it even mean, huh? Huh?
Fair.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah. I kept the other thing about Bell's attitude in this particular scene is when he says, I think he's talking to Constant here. He says, you know, Empire may fall. In fact, I would even say Empire will fall, but not yet. That really rang back to where Hari says in episode 4 or something, in the flashback stuff, like, all empires fall eventually, right? And that's all he's saying. He's trying to speak some common sense to the galaxy. The Empire will fall. We have to be ready for it. He's saying roughly the same thing here. He thinks Empire will fall.
And it's also interesting that there's like an inverse proportion in his mind between an empire's longevity and its power. Like, the more power it tries to accumulate and influence, so effectiveness, that's another way to say it being effective, the shorter it'll be lived because it'll piss people off, it'll rankle, it'll make...
Exactly.
The more it tries to not rankle and go for longevity, it has to sacrifice its power to keep the nobles happy, to make the people happy.
I really liked that dichotomy they set up. It was something I hadn't thought about, but they're absolutely right.
It is super interesting. It is super interesting that you either have to, at some point, sublimate your will to the will of other people outside your circle, or you have to wield power, which eventually, you do it enough times, makes you unpopular. I just gotta say, it's a neat little... I've never really heard a political theory like that before, but it seemed... It survived 5 minutes of thinking about it, which is more than I can say for most novel political theories you hear floated on science fiction shows.
Absolutely. Then Bell goes to see Day and up on the bridge. Glaewyn relays the reconnaissance. Cleon chooses peace and goes down to the planet to meet with Foundation. And afterward, Demerzel just tells Bell to perform his function, which is interesting. She chose him for a reason.
Yeah, what? So that's what's had me spinning. Like, did she choose him because he's a good man and wouldn't follow an illegal order from the Emperor, in which case she fucking misjudged, or did she pick him because he is his bottom a loyalist that will never disobey a direct order? Even though that's his thing that he's infamous for, is he disobeyed a direct order.
Or is she searching for someone who can take over from the Cleonic dynasty? as her mouthpiece, as the face of Empire for her.
And the way they constructed this dilemma is exactly what McGlawen was worried about. He's like, you were disobeyed the orders. Where it's like, well, yeah, it's saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of sailors. Oh, it's what civilians? It's okay. This is literally what came to pass.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. There's a greater good argument to be made, but boy, it seems in the moment it seems like a tough argument to make.
It seemed like Bell was trying to find an ally. Like, if I could, if Lady Demerzel would kind of like, yeah, he's scaring me, then there's a conspiracy afoot. But she shut him down hard.
Oh yeah, because she has her own plan.
I wonder if he had opened up communications with Hari Seldon, what would have happened?
I think there would have been a lot. Well, I mean, he'd have to take everything he learned back to Day, and Day would still be just as incensed about it.
But could he overthrow Day?
I don't think so.
I mean,
I don't know. Maybe with the fleet and his
it's honestly, if Demerzel allows it, it would happen. Because I don't know it's just Empire and 30 dudes with him. He's got a whole fleet loyal to him.
Right, that's the thing. I don't know. I don't know how much of the fleet is super loyal to Bell. If it's just his direct commands, or if
I think this is the 20th fleet, and they said that this is absolutely loyal to him.
Okay. Well, then if there are at least 19 others, I don't know that he stands a chance of taking out Empire with his fleet.
We also now know what to call the model that we're asking for in merchandise. These warships are called trireme class warships, named after the old Roman and Greek ships of war, the rowing galleys. So that was I thought that was interesting. They definitely have a design aesthetic, the Empire does.
Oh yeah. This is the second time. I don't those ships with rotating rings around a stationary cockpit seem to be all the rage right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sci-fi.
So hot.
Yeah.
The B-wings were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
If the B-wings just put the shit in the center, that would have stood the test of time. They'd be the new X-wing, but they had to put it at one side. It just wasn't where it's at.
Let's go over to Empire meeting with Cermak and Sut, and he gives them Polly as a gift and says he'd like to go see their church. So they take him there.
Their hot church.
Very hot, yeah. He sees that it's actually a factory, and Day demands a display of what Empire's money has bought them. So Polly shows off a device that can turn iron into gold. And that's cool, but Day then discovers that they've been giving away personal auras to anyone who wants them by the crateful. He declares them a cult and resorts to violence as he leaves.
I thought this was a great scene. And this Kulvinder Gear, I guess, is the guy who's playing the adult Polly, was just amazing at showing this guy who's just terrified and doesn't have all that much faith to begin with, which we know, but and other characters, like the administrator, is a person of no large faith either. But when he starts the sermon, he's kind of timid, but the whole congregation kind of joins in and lends their power and support, starting with the administrator, and you can see him gaining power from it and coming up with a pretty convincing, the wonders he's seen and the gold spun from iron and the changing metals at the point where changing the soul, and it's not the galactic spirit at the end. It's not supernatural, it's just progress. And the fact that you guys are arms merchants, how much do you sell these to rabble? It's we just give it to people, which is just even worse in Empire's mind. I just thought it was an incredible scene that had a lot of because the whole point in my mind is is this going to work? Because it wasn't beyond my belief that the Empire would try to do something new and come up with peace with the Foundation, which obviously wouldn't help the Empire long run. But I thought it was great. What did you?
Yeah, if they have all this wealth that they can create from seemingly nothing. I mean, these magical technologies, they have a lot to offer Empire if he would accept it.
Yeah. And the other thing is as my perspective is kind of a secular atheist, a former fundamentalist, I thought it was it wasn't offensive. This Church of Scientism, I kind of for the first time you see where they're going with it,
Yeah. It's not about worship. It's about hearts and minds. You know, it's about winning some sort of equality, some sort of community. You know, that's the vibe I was getting from it anyway.
Yeah, like what do you believe in to save you? Do you believe in a far off empire? Do you believe in your community and the technology that you have available? Do you have faith in your own self and your sense of pride? Yeah, I just really liked it, and I think this Poly guy has been just a great character, and really hurt to see him get sucked into singularity at the end of this episode. And also, they look is the more butch he tries to look, the weaker he comes across. Like when he screams, when he calls for the High Cleric to put on a dog and pony show, and when Polly's not doing it fast enough, him screaming now, and then he slaps him and kicks him and does it. Just makes him look so weak.
Yeah, I agree. You know who else looks weak? The new warden. I'm just going to say it. New warden looks very uncomfortable. First day on the job, Empire shows up.
Yeah. Last guy got incinerated by the ghost of Hari Seldon. Now this fucker shows up. I just, I'm
sure she'll be a fine warden someday, but boy, it's a rough transition for her.
She's no Salvor.
Nope.
Just try flipping a coin, see when it tells her.
So we can go up real quick to the ships again, where Bell begins to seize the Invictus, but it powers up and readies for battle, and they launch the Whisper Fleet, and I'm like, uh-oh, we've got some ships with some crazy powers. We don't even know what kind of ships they're going to have other than the jumping capability. They kind of were nothing. I was not impressed by the Whisper Fleet, let's say. And I'm not talking about technically or from story
they
perspective.
seem to match.
They're fairly weak.
They seem to be in size and scale more than a match for the Imperial fighters. Actually, it's
not
clear
enough to protect
me.
the Invictus, which
you're right.
surprised me.
But
I expected some almost magical capabilities from them.
And when the Invictus opened up, I really thought that they were in trouble. Like, I thought they were telling the truth, of them being flabbergasted at how much power and ferocity this thing was fighting with. And so, if you're looking for a hope that this is all a misunderstanding, this is all some Seldon trickery, I thought it was interesting that Captain the Invictus is trying to buck up this young ensign, who's looking scared and out of place, and he's like, is this your first combat? She's like, yeah, it's mine too. In fact, most of us have never seen combat before. But he said something like, "There's I can't remember if he said the whole troop or the whole company has a part to play tonight." But he used a word of it's stagecraft.
Which is illusory in its tone, right?
And when they're getting beaten, when the ship is exploding and they realize it's they all just kind of calmly step back from their consoles. They didn't seem like a bunch of green young recruits grappling with the idea that they're about to die.
So the shot that I remember most vividly from that scene is when the commander steps away from the console, his hands are shaking.
Are they shaking? I just noticed he took him off the
They felt very shaky to me. Maybe that's just the actor, or maybe that's intentional. But
because I don't believe that. I don't. If these guys are in on it, they're in on it because they know they're not going to die, and I don't know why their hands would shake. And I don't, if they were in on it, I don't think Hari would tell them "Hey, I'm going to use you to sacrifice as a potential sacrifice in a way to try to end this one last time bloodlessly." He wouldn't tell them that, right? That
no, Hari would lie to them, and then if they survived afterward, he'd say, "I lied to you all. Now do this other thing."
Right. Exactly. So I felt like there was some trickery going on there.
Mm-hmm. There could be, but I want to take it at face value. I until I see actual evidence of trickery, I'm going to take it at face value because it's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah. I thought Demerzel throughout these scenes, like once the Empire essentially declares he's ready to execute judgment, the rest of her scenes, she's played like on high alert. Her like head swiveling to like in sharp, inhuman movements. It's like a praying mantis head. Her manners are sharp. She's always saying we should leave. We should get the fuck out of here. Demerzel looked afraid and stressed out.
Yeah.
You don't see, not a look you see very much on her.
On his way back to the ship, Dave spots the vault and heads for it, and we'll get to that here in a second. We also see Bell launching the fighters with Glaywin leading them, and that's going to be costly later.
Gives him his Imperial command necklace as good luck.
So much for that. And then we go back over to Gale and Salvor, who reach the beggar. Salvor gives Gale the Radiant and hangs back to cover her escape. And she ends up fighting Loron and kind of Hugo, the guy who can make himself look like Hugo, while Telum confronts Gale inside the ship. Telum takes the Radiant from Gale and goes into her mind to guilt trip her first as her father, and then over Salvor's death. But in this vision, Telum gets accosted by the mule in Gale's mind and overpowered. And then Gale and her start fighting in the real world, I assume there could be trickery involved. Who knows? Gale begins to whip Telum's ass, and Salvor struggles with Loron.
Yeah, that all happened. Sometimes I get irritated when characters fall for the same joke over and over and again, or the same trick. Like, it drives me crazy in zombie films where like you're 6 months into the zombie apocalypse and like grandma's been in the upstairs room and you're thumping around up there, and fucking Jim Bob comes in there, mama, what's wrong with you? Why are you groaning like an animal? And he gets his fucking neck bit, and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. She falls for Hugo a lot, but in my mind, it's like an acid trip where it's like, you might know that your nightstand isn't made out of laser beams, but if you like triple or that dose, you could not. No, there's no intellectual exercise you can engage to say you're not seeing the thing. And to me, when she's projecting this thing, she's not saying like, he's trying to Hugo joke. It's like in her mind, that is Hugo.
Yeah, she's under the mental influence of this telepath, right?
Yeah, she's not like, this is crazy. It's like, yeah, it's 100% real to her in every context. So it made it like super effective. Like how it'd be so disorientating to try, and I think it might actually cost her something. Like, because Laurent is Laurent? Yeah, Laurent. Mm-hmm. Did he die? Did she kill him at the end there?
Yeah, she sucks all the oxygen out of the airlock, and he's just dead.
I mean, I would buy that he doesn't. If he shows up alive, I could buy that she saves him. But like, it seems like she wanted to kill him, and the guy died as Hugo, and it seemed like it cost her something to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. She probably felt like it was real.
She's already lost so much in her young life. She watched her father die. Everyone she knows is dead because of entropy. And now this, yeah.
Yeah, I guess if I were going to point to a part of the episode and say this is weaker than the other part of the episode, the question in my mind keeps ringing as, why don't they just unthink her mind? Why doesn't Telum unthink Gale's mind, unthink Salvor's mind, unthink Hari's mind, everybody's mind, right. Unthink, I win.
I have a fan cannon.
Okay.
I don't think this is actually Telum here. I don't think Telum could get her ass from the temple to here before Gale and Salvor. Like your people might know, but you're old and weak. I think she's mentally projecting herself, so she's like fighting Gale with like a fraction of her total strength. And what was the other question?
I mean, Hari beats her brains in with a stick. Is that reasonable to assume?
Fuck. You're right. You got me. So, sick ass.
Yeah, that's a good question. How did she get here?
Hauls her ass off that stone slab and hustles down and beats these young women, these young
Loron
fit
carried
women.
her on his back.
Maybe I'd buy it.
He's pretty strapping.
He's a big strapping dude.
Yeah. That's a good question though. I don't know.
Because I was thinking like, wait, she's a mental projection, and then what was the other thing with the Loron? I forgot what you asked about that, but. So do we buy that something can.
Oh, it's just
something.
unthinking people's minds. Just win. It's the auto win button. Hit it.
The fact that I don't think that just Laron is strong enough to do that. It's something that the students can do in mass.
Well, and the Telum herself, I think, can just do.
Okay, I would say the Telum is there in the flesh and blood. I don't understand,
right?
And unless there's lingering effects of the sonic disruption that's causing.
Like I said when I recap this scene, I think this is all real world. I think this is all actually happening, but it's impossible to know with this set of characters and circumstance.
Is there a penalty to unthinking someone's mind if you're wanting to take over their mind? It seems like you can reverse it though.
Yeah, she'll wake up eventually, and when she does, she's chained to this ritual stone.
Seems like it'd be the perfect thing to do. I wonder.
Really does.
Of course, every once in a while, sometimes in third acts of things, you just got to kind of go with it. You gotta make a leap.
You make a dramatic choice, right?
Yeah.
And in every single other way in this episode, they made the perfect dramatic choice. Just maybe not here for me. We'll see. I'll maybe ask Goyer about that when we talk to him here in a week or so.
He's gonna unthink your mind. What you get for asking questions.
Is there anything else you want to talk? I mean, a lot of crazy shit happens in this. I mean, the mule can somehow. I was wondering if Telum was the mule, but the mule overpowers her in Gale's mind, and I don't know what's happening here now. I'm very confused.
I think it's so. My idea is that that's her biggest weakness is that she legitimately fears her own death, and she's been able to, she's got. Most people only have a normal human lifetime to hone that fear. She's had several, and the personification of the mule, she is so frightened by it, it gives Gale a momentary advantage. Mm-hmm. It's like I think that with given
so
several
Gale's
seconds,
the one accosting her mentally, not the mule.
A lot of this stuff reminds me of Legion, and Legion had a lot of different ways that they could portray a psychic battle. I don't necessarily need the stuff to physically be real happening, but again, I think here's my thing. I guess this all has to be pretty much straight up because they didn't use any of the camera tricks that they've been using to show that there's psychic jackassery afoot.
Yeah, in some scenes where there's definitely psychic jackassery afoot, they do, and so when they don't use it, you have to assume they're not. But I don't know. We'll see how it plays out in the finale. So Day approaches the vault, unconcerned with the battle raging overhead. He abandons his aura and his shirt to prove that he's not afraid of Hari's wrath, his armor. Hari appears and invites him inside for a chat, and Demerzel goes with.
I was trying to think of does he not realize that chainmail is its own form of armor, or is it so decorated at this point that he's? Because I was trying to think of
yeah, I mean, it's gold,
is this a character
not...
tribute that he is leaving one level of armor on and saying that is it kind of showing that he's a little bit of hedging his bets here? He's still not fully committed. He just doesn't have the in it to go all in on something, or am I projecting Hari as a hologram here?
I don't know. I can see it as a thematic thing.
Every single step he took towards this vault, I'm like, oh, keep walking, you son of a bitch. You're gonna be writhing on the ground and unconscious a second later. And what's Demerzel gonna do? And you could kind of tell Polly could, when he's like, what are all these? Oh, these were flags planted by children on a dare, and reminding us of what did this stuff. And I kept on thinking he's going to walk into this fucking null field being a dumbass.
Yeah,
so many ways that the show teased me that Hari was going to win.
And yet he keeps removing all of those roadblocks to Day's victory that we know he has. That's the thing. We know he can essentially unthink Day's mind in this moment if he wants with that null field.
When he's inside the vault, there's nothing that he can't do to Empire.
I assume, yeah.
Shows that this is as unbelievable as it is, this must be an act of strength, that this is a sacrifice that Hari can make, and it's not even a fatal one. But when Day walked into Hari's office, I was supremely confident that the Foundation was going to win. The Foundation was going to easily win, and probably without firing a shot, just like Bell had talked about.
Me too. I also Hari's whole demeanor was saying that.
I thought that was really funny that Demerzel's worried about the orbital battle that's already taken place, and Empire's like, let Bel Rios earn his reputation as general. Like, fair enough. He's supposed to be the best. I'll let him.
A job.
Yeah.
And then Glaywin's also up there. He launches his fighters, and the Whisper Fleet engages, and he scores a kill to Bel's delight. These are Imperial switchbacks, I guess, are the name of these fighters, a type of fighter.
They called them Pellis class, or that was their call sign.
That's their call sign, yeah. Pellis 1 is Glaywin.
Yeah, I looked up
2.
Pellis, and that is Latin for an animal skin or pelt. And in a certain context, it can be referred to as a military tint, because I guess those are covered, as you'd imagine, in animal skins.
Mm-hmm.
And none of those really made sense in terms of a call sign. So,
I mean, if they're defense,
it's expeditionary force, it's embarking, it's like got it, so it's.
Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe my entomology search let me down.
There's an interesting detail in this scene about the Whisper ships. The Whisper Fleet, they apparently have 2 life forms on every ship. 1, the pilot, and 2, some kind of organic navigation center, as Glaywin calls it. But I don't know that he can really know that necessarily. I mean, he probably assumes that based on what he saw of the Whisper ship.
And it seems consistent with Polly talking about starships with brains steering themselves through the cosmos. Like, it does seem like it's not an unfair depiction of the technology, but I doubt it's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting implications from that. I hope it's not the end of it.
Like, are they real human brains? Are they vat grown? Are they, like... Or
is
this like
to
the start of a Demerzel? Exactly. Is this like a Model A Demerzel type brain, positronic type brain?
I don't know. How advanced is it? Have they given it the ability to feel, or is it just performing calculation functions for them and it happens to be organic? Is it more like the spacers who have needs and wants and desires? Apparently, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Or maybe we won't. They all seem to have been destroyed. I'm sure they have more in the Outer Reach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can't be all of their ships here on Terminus.
No, I although, like I said, part of me wants to say that no, the Empire just got routed, and that's the point. It was designed to be destroyed. It's the ablated, there's this. So what we understand to be the second foundation is going to be the first foundation. There's a super secret double probation foundation 3 going on.
Yeah, I'm not ready to stake any claims there, but I could see it. Sure, why not? So Hari inside the vault reiterates his message that the fall is coming. Day doesn't agree, and they spar verbally for a while, even pulling Demerzel into the argument. Eventually, Day loses his patience and declares himself an outlier, to which Hari responds, "No, you're not." And then he offers to show Demerzel the Prime Radiant. And that was super interesting to me. But there's a lot of super interesting stuff in this scene. Another fascinating one.
We've talked about this. Like, why can't he just show and Demerzel's smart enough to figure it out and determine the truth of it, and here the offer is made.
I think both
right?
Sorry, what?
I read her as wanting that.
To see the Prime Radiant?
She wanted to look at that cedar. Yeah, she wanted to look at that crystal ball.
I mean, why wouldn't you? If not just to see how wrong it is. If she doesn't believe in it, you'd still want to look at it and poke the holes in it, right? And that's what I love about this scene in particular. Everything that Day is saying is true from our perspective. Everything Hari's saying is true from our perspective. If you are Hari and your life's work, the thing you died for, is in jeopardy, of course you wouldn't give that up. That's it. That's everything to you. And Day, as Empire, that's everything to him. Yeah. And he's making these points that I think are astute and difficult to assail. I won't say unassailable, but like
it's extremely well written scene, and how rapid fire and back and forth, and it felt like a physical confrontation as much as a verbal one.
Yeah. There's
Has
no
a rhythm
physical
that way.
violence, but I mean,
Well,
ideally,
I wouldn't want to be a loose piece of paper on Dr. Seldon's desk. Let me put it that way.
Sure. But ideologically, I think it's interesting because Day is saying, must you provoke me to reach the mathematical conclusions that you predict?
Yes.
And Harry's response is to say, well, if it wasn't me, it'd be somebody else. But that argument does not stand in the face of you being the one actually doing it.
Right.
You can say that it would be somebody else, and maybe that were true, but it's you actually doing it. So if you stop
doesn't hold up
doing
in court, for sure.
yeah, you can't just say. It's why we don't let people get away with saying I was just following orders when committing war crimes, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, if
Or
it
if
wasn't
there's
me,
like
it'd be
a
somebody else. No,
Yeah,
you did it. You did it.
Yeah.
So Day's not wrong here. Maybe he does not have the full scope of the situation in his head like Harry does. And so he doesn't realize how true that statement is, that if it wasn't him, it would definitely be somebody else. But that's not an easy argument to make in the face of it.
I also like that Harry outright denied that he was responsible for the attack on the Emperor, which leaves quite a few suspects. Like, where would you put the money on who called the assassin? Sereth, Dusk, Dawn, or Demerzel? I think those are the only people it can be at this point.
I would say it's almost certainly Demerzel. And a lot of the looks in this scene make me feel more strongly about that. When he brings up the topic, Demerzel looks almost nervous.
But how? How can she take direct action against these people?
Well, maybe this is some indirect action that's been taken as a result of some of her other choices.
And we also know that at the beginning of this episode, at the beginning of the season, rather, that this particular Day was more genetically drifted than like almost any other one before him. So, interesting.
She does work pretty hard to save his life after the fact, but
because right around here in the conversation, Harry stops talking to Day and turns all of his attention to his arguments to Demerzel. And I thought that was interesting because she tries to get him in some logic. She's like, I thought you were the guy that said he's trying to minimize harm, and now look, you're here provoking war. And he said, well, you know, the scope and scale and duration of things is completely different. I thought you, of all people, would know better than that.
Yeah.
Which strongly implies that Harry knows she's a robot.
Almost certainly. Yeah, and there were a couple other things in this episode, too. Yeah.
But this is almost a dead giveaway.
Mm-hmm. And if not, I think he's certainly smart. Here's the thing. If Demerzel did try to assassinate Day, I think Harry, from what I've seen in the past, is smart enough to deduce that based on a look and some of the things she's saying in this scene. Like, that look when he mentions assassinations, when Harry is asked, did you send the assassins? And Demerzel just gives this look. If Harry notices that look, I think he's smart enough to put it together. Based on what he did with Salvor last episode.
Any love for the Day or Dusk being? Like, I don't think Day, but maybe Dusk? You think it's Demerzel, though? I think it's Demerzel, too.
I'm almost certain. It would come as a big shock at this point if it wasn't Demerzel.
I don't even think they have to necessarily come out and say how or why she's able to do that, because I think they've given us enough plausible reasons that they could punt that as a interesting question for next year. Because like they've already given me, I think, 3 plausible reasons why Demerzel could kill. You know, he's not matching the genetic dynasty. He is trying, this is all in the context of brokering a marriage deal in the first place, which is, it's like
she's loyal. Yeah, she's loyal to her own empire, which is something he's trying to destroy.
Exactly. And then, so like I think there's already a number of different ways that they could have explained why she could do the things she does, but we'll see which one they pick.
Yeah, we'll see.
Invent a better one. The future's invented every second. Invent a better one.
Yeah. So the battle rages in orbit. Empire's fighters open a path to Invictus and attack it. Glawen scores a direct hit on their engines, which destroys or disables the entire ship. But he's hit with shrapnel and spirals down to the planet as Bell watches. Boy, that's a Death Star-esque bit of targeting, huh?
Yeah, that's the other thing that like as minorly bugged me about this is that I didn't feel like I knew enough about the technology to understand. It's like imagine if you were watching a Death Star run, but they had not explained the exhaust port or the concept of a photon torpedo.
Right.
It's like, oh, he shot sci-fi shit at this other sci-fi shit, and it went exploding. But I don't know. I guess you can roll that way, but you just that's kind of how Foundations that is do shit, and then they don't explain it. Like they hit him with a fire beam, that is an anti-tractor beam at the end of this episode. I'm like, what the hell? I was like, what the hell's going on here? But I'm like, what? I mean, it's indistinguishable from magic. What?
Right.
I think
that's the thing. How do they have personal auras? How do they? Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm willing to roll with it. I do wonder how.
Look, if they want to come out, the lavishly illustrated 128-page technical manual for this series. I'll buy it. I don't put a gun to my head. I'll buy it. But until then, it's magic.
For sure. I do wonder how a single shot disables but doesn't destroy a ship like this. Because with the Death Star, its chain reaction destroys the entire thing. With this, it just disables it enough that it can't fight back. But the visualization of it is very fiery. But then there's still enough of it left to throw down at the planet and blow that thing to hell.
The mood on the Invictus is weird. It's not a doomed ship of young people about to die. It just doesn't feel like it to me.
Suspecting something, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the vault real quick. Hari offers Day the Prime Radiant and offers to teach Demerzel to read it. Day refuses that offer. Demerzel is not asked what she thinks. He gets word of the destruction of Invictus and offers Hari a proposal of his own. Admit that your math is flawed and I will spare Terminus. Hari makes a plea to Demerzel to invent a better future and refuses Day's offer. So Day orders Bell to bring the Invictus down on Terminus, killing every civilian on the planet, and he leaves the vault with the Prime Radiant.
I thought it was interesting when, Hari said, I just can't give you what you want because the problem is this stuff is real and it's happening. The Empire, had tears in his eyes. That this was, I get the opinion that this Day especially thought he was trying to do the things that Hari wanted him to do. He says as much. It's like, you said we were stagnant. You said we're this, we're that. I have, done everything that you said, and I am, and that line where he's like, I am the outlier, and he's like, look, I've seen outliers, kid, and you ain't it. That's what really got him into his fury, to being reminded once again by a great man that you're unremarkable. You're not even a real person. Your own progenitors called you shadow men and half men. Damn.
And you're insignificant to history.
Yeah.
Even in your position, you are insignificant in history.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this guy did not want to be. You look at what Dusk said about him, right? Dusk was fine not being anything, letting Demerzel rule, but this one came up wanting to prove himself.
Right. I want to fix things.
No matter how much he changes, no matter how crazy he goes, right? He's doing the craziest thing he can think of to kill the Cleonic dynasty, and it's still not enough to make a mark on history.
It's not even an outlier. In his mind, completely flipping the script is okay, well, you change the comma to a period.
Right. In the mind of a man who has an extremely good grasp on history.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, he's feeling extremely inferior or mediocre, I guess. He should absolutely destroy this Prime Radiant, right? He should smash it with a hammer. He should get outside of here. He should say, bring me the Empire's biggest hammer and mash it, because Demerzel is going to get her hands on this.
But
maybe she gains some faith.
He's hobbled by his own pride. The thing that Hari was afraid would doom him is because you're right, he should, but then he would look afraid. And his whole charade about removing his armor and his, that's the thing. It's like, okay, this guy's removing his armor. I thought it was funny how Hari brought that up short. That's the thing that really set Day off, is when Demerzel's like, well, you must have something to bargain with, or else you would have killed us by now. And Harry's like, why would I bother? You just uncork another one, which is a hilarious way to say decant, is to uncork one of these guys.
Their bottles of wine.
And that is what sets Day off, because he just revealed a charade that, like, you're not afraid because you know if I kill you right now, you'll wake up on Trantor and you won't even know that you were defeated.
There's no stakes for you. Why would you be afraid, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't, it's like by design. You are in, like, you're thinking you're outside the box. You are constructed in a box that makes you think that you're outside. It's like he's exactly what the first Cleon worried he'd be, only more so. He's deluded into thinking he has freedom.
And Harry here is the one that has stakes. Harry's the one who has something to lose in this scenario, because they can't uncork another hand.
Built.
Although,
it's the thing that he built. It's not. You're going with the permanence of it, but like, yes, there's something at risk here for Harry. Whereas the Empire, it's like if it falls or lives, like this fucking Cleon had nothing to do with it. He didn't set it up, and he's probably not going to be the one that defends it or protects it or destroys it. He doesn't have that power. He's just a guy.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to propose this particular deal that Day proposes. Admit your math is wrong.
Yeah.
Because Harry has been working this season to set himself up as a god in the minds of his followers. And a god cannot remain a god if they admit they're wrong, I think.
Well, also, Harry's the other thing I thought was deliciously ironic about that is that the Foundation's whole premise is set up on telling a little tiny lie in service of saving the bulk of humanity. And that's what Day, like, I don't think Day's asking Harry to stop believing in psychohistory. No. He's like, I want you to publicly recant it.
Yes.
And it seems like it'd be very easy for Harry to be like, okay, well, that's just another little white lie. I'll recant psychohistory, but, we'll keep the Great Spirit or what. Like,
well, then he's not the martyr that he becomes at the end of this episode. The martyred god, honestly.
I mean, he martyrs. Like, yeah. No, I understand. I'm just saying that, like, it's interesting that, like, that's all Day's asking is to tell another white lie to people.
Sure.
It
seems like a very small ask, but neither of these men are seeing it from the other perspective, right?
But it also wouldn't stop there. It's like, it'd also be like, and you have to you have to disband the Church of Scientism, and you have to turn all over your technology and science. And it just, it'd be a Darth Vader Bespin situation. The deal just keeps getting worse all along.
Yep. And then Harry ends up in carbonite, and it's the whole thing.
Yep.
Let's go over to Salvor managing to trap Lauren in the airlock, and she kills him by venting the oxygen while he pleads with her as Hugo. And then he sees Telum on top of Gale and goes to help. Then a very corporeal Harry shows up and beats Telum to death with a stick.
If we were watching this in a movie theater, that would be a cheer moment.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations. You guys have made me hate Rachel House. She's
I mean, this is blowing up Jaws at the end of that. Yeah. I mean, this is the moment you've been waiting for. This is, killing Jason. Can he ever be killed? I don't know.
Jason Voorhees. Telum Voorhees. This the way he does, he just beats her, just like blood splashing on his face like he's a Bloodborne character or whatever. And then he's like just panting. He's like, I never liked her. It's just like the understatement in the history. Right. And like I said,
it's irrefutable that she is dead if that is in fact her physical body. They show the head just
it's
laid open
entirely. And my mind is like, why would she generate that image of herself being defeated? Like if you want to quibble, you could be like, how did she sneak up? How did he sneak up on him? But like, is that because his mind's murky? Is it because it's mechanical? Is it? There's lots of fun.
She's distracted by Gale and Salvor,
But the one thing, a piece of feedback came in between. Obviously, it's not about this, but I thought it was interesting because my first thought is, and we talked about this off of, when we were running errands today. What happened to the Gale feeling Harry's drown? Like we talked about how that was cool, how that all lined up in retrospect. Craig T wrote in and said, I have a observation that might be irrelevant after the next episode, but the wording Gale uses to tell him about feeling water in Harry's lungs, she said she didn't feel him die, she has felt his lungs fill up with water.
Well, there
And he
you
said,
go. If Hari is a half human, half robot hybrid that doesn't have to breathe, courtesy of the mathematician robot,
So
I think we're good.
he could have the sensation, and it's like, the other thing is like, it reminds me of Demerzel saying that like, well, this person expected tears, so I'm going to give him tears, even though I wouldn't cry because of what he's doing to my body. You could apply that in Hari. It's like, well, Telum's expecting me to drown, so I'll drown and go into like low power mode, and then.
I'm not sure that Hari is aware that he's a robot hybrid. And look, this is headcanon. They haven't told us yet that he's a
It's
robot
possible.
hybrid, right?
It's entirely possible. He
But
seems
it's my
confused.
assumption, yeah.
If we take him at his word, he seems confused.
And he's breathing heavy in this scene, but,
Sometimes some stuff is just force of habit,
Yeah, affectation of being a passable human. I don't know, man. It definitely seems to me like some shenanigans were played bringing him back to life. He is not fully human.
And that's fine.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
totally.
Like, they're only going to be in
It
trouble
makes
if
a
he's
lot
not.
of sense.
Yeah.
If this mathematician appearing entity is a robot herself, and it seems like she might be based on the mining droids and how they responded to her, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I think there's a very good possibility that's true.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, let's go over to Hober. He sees Day walking by his cell and starts taunting him to the disbelief of Constance. She's like, what are you doing? He picked a really bad time to do it, too. So Day has him taken to the bridge. Demerzel pauses in the hall and says, I gotta go home. Day's confused by that. She apologizes for having failed to mold him into the leader he needed to be. And then she leaves him with one massive final burn before leaving for Trantor.
These last 5 minutes were like the roast of Day, man.
Dude, it's a huge burn. You are a sperm mistaking its random motion for complexity. It's so good.
And then with disgust, go do what you'll do because it's too late to change you.
Uh-huh.
She just says, I apologize for the mess that you are. Yeah, and him, like, again, like, it's just like he's rejected by his mother and I guess his surrogate father here.
And I love how he's laying out all of the triumphs of his own free will and his own grandiosity, right? And I'm a complete man. And then she just burns him to the ground.
And the fact that it's just so sad because like he thinks he's making these momentous decisions and he's saying that like it's not like, son, you made a mistake, you fell short, just like you are insufficient.
Mm-hmm. He's heard it from Hari, now he's hearing it from Demerzel, his most trusted confidant.
You're not mediocre, you're not great, you're insufficient.
Where have I heard that term before?
Like I said, he's got taking a lot of negative energy into these scenes.
Yeah, I'm definitely worried for Hober and Constant because, like I said, they're stirring up shit at the exact wrong time. This is a man who is pissed
yesterday.
off. Was that?
Did you hear? It's one of the things he taunts him with. Is yesterday.
Yeah, and he just got ultra burn from his robot mommy. It's for the first time, It's going to be a bad scene for them, I think, after the conclusion of this episode. But we'll see. Speaking of the conclusion of this episode, final scene here. Glawen survived the fall to the planet, calls up to the ship, says, I'm here, come get me. Day orders Bell to drop the Invictus on the planet at the same time. And then there's this heartfelt plea from Glawen to Bell to do it for the good of the galaxy. He needs to stay in his position. So Bell does it. He follows the order. The Invictus falls. It shatters the planet into pieces. This is the most definitive destruction of characters I've seen in really anything. Assuming this is real.
Yeah, I mean,
no
that's
Hari
the thing.
trick.
It's like, Because I remember, we had a similar situation with the Rings of Power, where I think they definitively told us characters were going to die, and then they just were kind of dusty the next episode. They can't do that. They can't do that with this one. And again, like I'm just going. I think there might be some trickery at foot. And I'll just say it's like, yeah, you can do anything in storytelling as long as you do it well. But I kind of hope that it's the audacious thing that I think it is, which is just a complete wipe of the first Foundation.
Mm-hmm. And then come back 1,000 years later, right, and show us.
Yeah, this is their Empire Strikes Back moment.
Harry is trying to shorten the period. He knows there will be suffering. He's trying to shorten that suffering, right? Well, Day's actions are prolonging it.
And the Foundation served its purpose, but now it's going a little too far into the religious thing. Like, if this keeps going, you've got another God Emperor. You got another, and Harry's, they are worshiping him. There's something to say to just resetting that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, you're martyring it, but you're also just doing away with the Church of Scientism to replace it, to evolve it, to rebuke it.
I think evolve it. If I'm looking at some of the things they've been doing in the last couple episodes, there was that thing that I noted last episode where the dude who was like the most against Constant and Polly and tried to have her killed when they came to Savannah. He's kind of looking at these books burning thoughtfully as he's doing it. And now that Harry has been martyred at the end of this potentially, and has been established as a god in this religion, the message is already out there.
Well, then these outer wild places are depending on Foundation after the withdrawal of the Empire
abandoned them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I could see this sparking a lot more faith out in the outer reaches because it's only one planet.
Yes,
this is not the entirety of the outer reaches or outer reach.
Yes. And this might even be like we don't know. They've carefully not told us the disposition of the Foundation. This could be like no longer important. The Foundation could be distributed all throughout the Outer Rim, just a way that this Demerzel's intelligence is distributed to wherever it's distributed to.
Yeah, and you come back 1,000 years later, right? And the new Foundation has sprung up. It's more powerful than ever. We see that it's now fervently followed as a religion. And the Empire has just strengthened it, right? It's prolonged the suffering overall, but it's strengthened Foundation and just brought about the outcome that Harry predicted anyway.
While we're talking about it, I thought we got a strong hint that Demerzel's distributed intelligence is at least extra-planetary.
Did we?
Like, it's not that she can switch bodies on this planet, that she could switch bodies off-planet, too. Because like what would get if she could switch bodies but she's still on the same planet, like what would that even get her? What body would she switch to? Is there some kind of repository somewhere? Is there some kind of ancient robot network that still operates? I don't know. The way you said it didn't seem like it's something she could just switch to. It's something that she could just escape and be gone. Which, God, how did they ever capture her in the first place?
Right. I don't know. I think that stuff is all, fan canon at this point, but I'm sure we'll get more information about that.
Yeah. I
don't know, man. This whole episode kind of it really exceeded my expectations and subverted them. I expected a more like Demerzel focused episode. I expected us to go back thousands of years, see Demerzel's creation, see the robot wars, things like that. I'm not unhappy with what we got at all. I'm actually more audacious in some ways than I expected.
Yeah, like it filled in a lot more blanks than I thought. I thought it'd be a lot more woozy, hazy, like Demerzel lore that didn't really mean. But yeah, it went through the heart of all the questions that we've had, really.
Yeah, while still leaving a lot of room.
I'm having this perverse incentive where I realize the longer I talk about this episode, it's directly keeping me from watching the next one. It's like,
well, what's done, man? We talked about the whole thing except for the final emotional spark of this scene between Belle and Glaywin. Let me ask you this: it's a beautiful scene. These actors are crushing it.
Oh, so good.
There are two heartbreaking scenes in television between two gay men this year.
Oh, my God, you're right. You're going all the way back to The Last of Us. Okay.
Early this year, which one is better? I'm going to put that up there. Which one is better? Because Oh, they're both so good.
Well, you know what? The thing is like they took a whole episode to weave this story, whereas we've been, relying again. The other thing is like I think, and this is a brilliant move by the production team, but they Control C, Control V their relationship from a long running stage play that these guys had worked up their chemistry and their emoted love for each other. So it's like that's a huge benefit.
Yeah. You
the other thing is, it's these guys are conventional men, like recognizably human people, whereas like Nick Offerman's character was so emotionally constipated that it kind of like, I don't know, the arc felt I'm gonna give it to Last of Us is what I'm saying.
I agree, but it's not too far off.
No, and it wasn't even a conversation until the last few minutes of this episode, because they ever from the moment he says "Hey, Glaywin," it tears your chest.
It's really about the focus of that Last of Us episode. That's what pushes it over the top for me. I was able to build that feeling over the span of an hour. Here I'm building it over the course of 5 minutes. And I'm having to recall. I'm having to bring that history back in. When I'm watching it all as one, tale, it is more effective. But man, they did the best with what they had here, and it's really good.
Like I said, the fact it's a conversation should be something they pat themselves on the back over in Foundation Land.
Yeah, for sure. That's it, man.
And they brought it back. They brought us back to the book about being conquered through love. I just keep like, the Empire is just a fucking maniac. But like I said, I don't know that the Empire sees people as real. Like I don't know if he sees himself as real.
Yeah.
That's the exponents of like just fucked everything up, and now like this is a super dangerous situation. I don't think Bell realizes it. And it's open question about whether Bell fulfilled the mission of Demerzel here.
How he's going to react in the future. Is this going to strengthen his conviction to remain, I guess, loyal to his oath to Empire for the good of humanity across the galaxy? Or is this going to crush him emotionally and cause him to abandon it?
In for a penny, in for a pound, right?
I suppose so. It's a pretty big step in the direction.
I thought the final the death montage was pretty good too. You had the director die, like it's like the most important thing in the world. The director's dying, but now the whole planet's going to die. The Invictus is in the sky, and like the whole time, like I'm telling you, up until the shockwave hit Polly, and I thought that there's like, as soon as it gets to the vault, it's just going to hit the shield, and like
it was literally like I'm thinking, okay, they got these personal auras. Maybe they have a bigger personal aura around the town, the civilization there. Maybe they could do that.
Yep.
And then I see the shot from space of the planet shattered into multiple fragments. I'm like, no, that's done. It's gone. It's all gone. With the exception of maybe the vault. I think the vault can survive, but that's it.
The vault could probably survive, I suppose. Like I said, I would be maybe, and we could be surprised. Again, the degree of difficulty of doing a schmuck bait of this magnitude is just off the charts. Like, you might break your ankle and have to stick it on that broken ankle. Like, was it Carrie Strug
style?
But it can be done, but it would take a heroic superhuman effort like that. So I think they're just this. We're seeing what it looks like on the tin. This is the destruction of the first Foundation, and everyone is devastated. They should make a point of like, no one is happy about this, not even Demerzel, except for the fucking Emperor, who's just face bathed in the destruction and just. Yeah, like a little boy watching a magic trick. He's just. Ugh.
Yeah, I feel like we lost how good Lee Pace is in this episode with all the other discussion about how good everybody else is, but damn.
This is a ridiculous role, and the way he vamps through some of it is.
It's necessary. It defines the character, his performance here.
And it's definitely different from the last generation of Cleons. Like, these are recognizably less serious, less substantial men.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt.
The shadows are getting longer. The half men are now quarter. I don't know.
The one other thing that survives this is the legend of Hari Seldon, and perhaps scientism itself. And I am looking for the ways that comes back after this. So you might have Vault with Hari in it out there. You might have the message that he was sending.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
we'll
if
see.
this is The Empire Strikes Back, we're going to have the return of the Hari, correct? Like, that's just the next thing that
Yeah.
comes after that. Tortured pun.
All right. Well, that's it, man.
You can send in feedback to the podcast by sending an email to foundation@baldmove.com. Once again, if you'd like to send the feedback to the show, foundation@baldmove.com is how you do it. I do want to remind people that this is the last opportunity to get Goyer feedback, because due to his schedule, we're going to have to record this. We'll have an opportunity to see the finale, but you guys won't have yet when we sit down and talk to him. So this will be the last opportunity. Unfortunately, won't be able to get with him after the finale airs. So if you do have a question for Goyer, make sure you put that word in the subject line somewhere so I can get it out. Foundation@baldmove.com. If you'd like to follow with the other stuff we're doing, we just wrapped up Justified. We're about to start Loki. We've got what's the other thing? I know Fargo is coming out late this year.
It's Daryl frickin' Dixon, man.
Oh, Daryl Dixon on The Walking Dead.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of Don Draper earlier this podcast, we got him in Fargo this season. Lots of stuff to follow the Bald Move as we stare down the impending content dead apocalypse. Just because they're just stopped making stuff in Hollywood now because of the strike, because of the owner, the producers in they're quite their day-like insistence on the way the keeping the things going the way they are. And not unclenching their fist a little bit. You can also follow. Yeah, you can follow everything we're doing on our social media. That's where I was trying to get to. Everything at Bald Move, whichever social media you want, except for TikTok, we're Baldest Move there. Finally, if you like to support what we're doing, you like us, you like what we're doing, you want more of it, you want less ads, you want no ads, in fact, support.baldmove.com is where you go. That's going to be it for us today. Again, get those questions into Goyer, foundation@baldmove.com. We'll see you next week for the finale. Until then, I'm A.Ron.
And I'm Jim.
Respect and enjoy the podcast.